In my English classes, before we do peer feedback, we do an activity I call the self-check. The self-check is pretty much what it sounds like. The writer checks her own essay to see what she's missing or what she needs to change. The way I do self-checks of essays can be a little bit tedious, I'll admit, but it's very effective for helping you see what you left out of your essay. The self-check teaches you how to look over your own essay, and it's important to be able to look over your own essay because when you get into upper level college classes, professors will assign essays, but they will not collect any drafts except for the final draft. You will be expected to write the previous drafts and check your own writing without the help of classmates or the professor. So you really need to know how to be able to check over your own essays before you get to this point in your academic career, so you know what you're doing. All right, so let's talk about what's involved with this whole self-check process. In class, I provide students with checklists of exactly what they need to have and in each and every paragraph. I do this because it's English 101, also known as Composition 1 or College Composition. English 101 is designed to teach students the building blocks of writing, so that's exactly what I teach. The checklist of items is everything that the student must use in every paragraph, but it can also be used in other classes, not just mine. This checklist is a building block, in other words. The checklist can also help you figure out how to fill that entire paragraph. It's the worst to sit in front of a screen and not know what to write, and my required items list is designed to eliminate this from occurring. So during the self-check, I give students this checklist of items and they have to read through their essay to see if they have all of these items. But it's more than just a simple read-through. For this read-through, it's designed to make you slow down, ponder, consider. You put your checklist and a printed copy of your first or second draft side by side and you read through the essay. While you are reading, you also label every sentence in your essay. For example, you circle or bracket your topic sentences and put topic sentence next to it. This is to say you're going to read and label your essay. You are also going to check off the things on the checklist that you have or highlight or circle the things you do not. So altogether, to do a self-check in my classes, you read, label, check, and highlight your essay. When we do this activity for the first time in class, many students tend to skim the essay and only make a few marks on the checklist. They do not slowly and carefully read their essays, and they don't label the parts of their essays. The reason people do this is because they think the point of the activity is to get the points and to be done with it. As a result of this tendency, I always give my students full points during the self-check as long as they're focused and not on their phones or sleeping. The point of this activity is to make their writing better, and I don't want anyone to worry about their grades when they're doing this self-check. I want them to focus on what they're supposed to and really narrow in on checking their essays and nothing else. Another reason students tend to slack during the self-check is because the self-check can be tedious, as I said, and it requires you to think and consider all of the parts of your essay. The self-check can be exhausting mentally the first time that you do it, but after the first time it becomes a lot easier to do. It should be habit to read our essays over and see everything when we finish them to make sure we have everything, but this is really too late in the process to do a thorough read-through. You're going to not want to think about your essay after you finish that final draft. You're not going to want to do the read-through. So this is why I have students do the self-check during the first or second draft. During the first or second draft, you have a lot more stamina to read through and thoroughly mark up your essay than you would if you were self-checking your final draft. So when you're doing a self-check of your essay, do not give up if you start getting bored of reading your essay, of doing the self-check. And don't give up if you're not sure what some parts of your essay are doing. Take a short break and come back to it. Ask for help. Talk to a peer. But don't give up. Remember that after you do a self-check, it's much easier to do it every other time afterwards. It's just the first time that can be really difficult. And the more effort you put into reading and evaluating your essay during this self-check, the better your final draft will be. So why do I know this? Why does the self-check work? Well, for one, I've noticed that students who tend to have very thorough self-checks have much stronger final drafts. Also, I implemented the self-checks because I kept reading essay after essay that didn't include the items I told students to include in their essays, and I had to take off points as a result. Why did I have to take off these points? Because one of the most important things all students must master is that you must follow the parameters of the assignment laid out by the professor. If you do not include the required elements, then you have not truly completed that assignment that was given. Yes, there are many ways to complete assignments, and there are many ways to teach too. Is the way I teach 100% perfect? No. But the assignments I give and the activities that we do all have a purpose, and if students don't do the assignments and activities correctly, they may not achieve the purpose and learn the skill I'm trying to teach. Consequently, I came up with a self-check to hold students accountable for completing essays in the correct manner, and to teach students how to improve their essays independently without the help of anyone else. So when you're doing the self-check, you must read your essay slowly and carefully. Label all of the sentences in your essay according to these sentences' purposes. Check off the items that you have in your essay on that checklist, and highlight any items that you are missing from your essay. These steps will help you see your essay in a new light and see what is missing from your essay. Let's go ahead and look at a sample essay and see how to do a self-check of this sample essay. All right, let's go ahead and get started on our self-check. We have our sample student, Janie Smith. I don't know why I always use the name Janie Smith. So this is the checklist of items that I require for essays in my class. It's got the introduction paragraph, body paragraph 1, body paragraph 2, body paragraph 3, body paragraph 4, body paragraph 5, and this is body paragraph requirements as a whole, so that's for all of the body paragraphs. Conclusion paragraph, and then any other comments that I want to add. Okay, so that's the self-check sheet. Then I've got my sample first draft. So again, this is something that I wrote, but I always use that fake name, Janie Smith. This is just an example essay. And I also have my annotated text. I want to make sure to include that just in case I have an idea that comes to me from the text, or if I need to look back and reference something. Maybe I misquoted something, or maybe I need to add in something else or change something and I need to look back at the poem. So I've already annotated this, okay? But I want to have it here just in case I need it, okay? I've also got a pen and a highlighter. You can use pencil if you want to. I just prefer to write in pen. The only downside of pen, of course, is that you can't erase. There are some really cool erasable pens. They're called Friction. They're by Pilot. I like these a lot, but right now I'm kind of feeling the gel pen, so that's why I chose this one. Okay, so remember that for self-check, you're going to read through the essay. You're going to label all of the parts of the essay, okay? You're also going to come over here to the checklist and check off anything that you have, but highlight or circle anything that you don't have. You don't have to use a highlighter. It just gives you a nice visual to have that color in there, so you can quickly go through and see based on those colors what you're missing, okay? All right. So we'll start at the beginning. When a couple has children, it is often said that they become more mature because they are now parents. However, it is not a requirement for people to become mature and serious in every way when they have children. In fact, it is probably better for people to be able to laugh at themselves sometimes and be silly because parenting is difficult and stressful. Humor and a lack of seriousness can make child rearing much more enjoyable. Also, humor and playfulness will help parents to bond with children. Okay, so you can see here that we have a transition word and the ideas start to change a little bit. So
this is a good point to stop. Now, you can read the whole paragraph or even the whole essay before you go back and start labeling. For me, it helps me to stop periodically, not every sentence, but I stop periodically every few sentences, maybe 4, 5, 6. It just kind of depends on where the ideas break. But again, you could read this whole page, you could read the entire essay before you start labeling. I'm just going to do what works best for me. Okay, so I'll go back over here and I'll look at what it says for hook. It says that the hook is a topic related to the thesis that serves as a general preview for the thesis. For example, an issue related to the poem, or connect the poem to some sort of modern social issue. So you can see here that I'm talking about raising children and being serious versus being playful, being mature, versus having a sense of humor, etc. Okay, and it talks about kind of having a balance of those things. Okay, so I'm going to put my brackets here, and I would say all of this is my hook. You'll notice that on the self-check sheet, it only says 1 to 3 sentences. Think of that as the minimum. It doesn't have to be that. Okay, so I'm going to check that off. It does talk about the topic. So let's go on to the next part and see what it's doing. Also, humor and playfulness will help parents to bond with their children. These bonds that are strengthened as a result of playfulness and humor will also make it easier to raise children, as the children do not just see their parents as controlling authoritarians, but parents who care about them. Here, I know I'm going to start talking about the poem, so that's going to be breaking into a new idea. So I'm going to bracket these two. Okay. Now, when I go back to my self-check sheet, you'll notice that the next thing that is required is the summary of the poem. Here, I'm not summarizing the poem. Okay, this is an idea that's related to the poem. It's not quite the hook, but it's also not the poem. So I need to think about, what is this doing? To me, it seems like it's adding on to this idea. Okay, so I'm going to say explaining and developing the hook.
One common problem that students encounter when they're doing the self-check is that they have a sentence in their essay that they don't know what it's doing. Sometimes this means that this sentence can be taken out because the sentence doesn't have a purpose. But most of the time it means that students have included a sentence that isn't on my checklist of required items for essays. Should you take out a sentence if it has a purpose in your essay, but it's not on my checklist of items? Absolutely not. Keep that sentence in. My checklist of items is broad enough to apply to almost all essays, but keep in mind that there are so many other things that can be included in an essay that are not on my checklist. Let's look at an example of this.
Okay, so let's look at the self-check to see an example of a sentence that has a purpose in the essay, but it isn't on the self-check. So these couple of sentences here, I labeled as explaining and developing the hook. I still labeled them even though they were not an item that was on the checklist, but I still thought about, what are they doing? Do they have a purpose? I decided that they did. They were explaining and developing the hook. Obviously, I'm not going to check off anything here, but I decided not to take these out, even though they weren't on the checklist. Okay. Next, in Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's The Children's Hour, it is clear to the audience that the speaker not only understands the importance of bonding with his children over play, but he intrinsically enjoys bonding and playing with his children. The speaker sees children's play as so important that he declares that children have a special time each day for play called the Children's Hour. The speaker values this time with his daughters not only for the bond it creates between them, but because he knows he is creating memories that he will remember forever. So there I kind of feel like it's changing over into a new idea, starting with the. Okay, so I'm going to come back up here. Sometimes you don't realize that the ideas have changed until you get to the new sentence and you're like, oh, wait, things have kind of changed. The tone has kind of shifted. Okay. Here, I would say this is summarizing the poem, which is what I needed. Okay, check that off. I've only got really 2 sentences here. It said summary should be about 3 sentences, but with my introduction being really long, with this added extra explanation, I'm going to say that's okay for me to only have a 2-sentence summary. now some essays might have it where you need to make the summary longer, and that's just part of the requirement. But for this particular essay, it's good. I'm going to say it's okay. So, summary of poem. Let's go back to this sentence, even though we read it already, because we're kind of thinking about this. So let's read it again. The speaker values this time with his daughters not only for the bond it creates between them, but because he knows he is creating memories that he will remember forever. Longfellow uses the father as a speaker to show the audience how valuable playtime is between parents and children. If Longfellow had chosen one of the daughters to be the speaker, the daughter would lack the foresight to value the playtime is between the father herself and her sisters. I think is an extra word here, so I'm going to use that kind of like squiggly mark. It's deli, it means to delete. With Longfellow's choice in speaker, the audience can truly see how precious playtime between parents and children is. Okay, so that last sentence is going to be our thesis. We always, whenever possible, want to end with a thesis. So everything else that we've got here, all right, that's going to be connecting the lead-in or the hook and the issue at hand to the thesis. So basically what it's doing is it's taking all of this up here and leading us into the thesis, okay? You could potentially argue that the second to last sentence, this is part of the thesis. So I'll probably write that off to the side and keep kind of thinking on it. Okay, so connecting the hook and the thesis, and then part of thesis question mark. I'm not sure. I'm still kind of thinking on it. Is that part of my thesis? Do I have a 2-sentence thesis? Which is something that you can certainly do. And then last, we'll label our thesis. Okay, so we'll go over here, check that off. Here, we know that our summary is only 2 sentences. I'll make that note to myself, and I may decide later to come back to it and change it. Okay, so let's go to the next paragraph. Longfellow brings readers into the playful atmosphere of the children's hour through the use of metaphors. Metaphors primarily used to put readers into the imaginations of the children and their father. To me, that reads very much like a topic sentence. All right. Check that off. And in my mind, I'm going to be kind of thinking the next thing should be an explanation. So I need to decide, is the next sentence that comes after my topic sentence, is it an explanation or is it doing something else? It is important that readers see the imaginations of the characters because readers will be able to see and feel the value of playtime and using one's imagination. To me, yes, that's giving more detail, so it's explaining it a little bit more. Longfellow takes readers into the speaker's game with his daughters without telling, without telling readers directly what game is played. Readers surmise that the daughters are bandits who have come to invade the king's castle through Longfellow's metaphors. Okay, so here we had our explanation. We've still got some more explanation, but it's not really explaining the topic sentence. It's kind of leading us into the support. It's kind of getting us into the poem a little bit. Okay, so it's not actually something that's on here. It's also kind of summarizing the poem. Next, Longfellow writes that the daughters are planning a sudden raid, and the speaker describes his daughters as banditti. All right, there we have those quotations. That's one of the ways we can tell that it is a piece of support. Now, as you advance in writing, you're not going to always use quotations. You're actually going to use paraphrases more often, okay? But at this level, we kind of do a bit of both. We do pieces of support that are quotations in 101, and we also use a bit of paraphrases. So we have S1, support number 1. After that, let's see if we've explained the support. The girls are not planning to steal things from their father and are not bandits. They are figuratively raiding their father's study because they are surprising him and stealing hugs and kisses. Yes, I would say that's explaining the support. It's just telling us what the support means. Sometimes your explanation of your support is you paraphrasing what the support is. If it's a quotation, that is. The girls are acting more secretively than they normally would, also prompting the speaker to compare them to bandits. Okay, so we've still got more explanation here. All right, I'll add in a little line to say, hey, this is explaining and this is explaining.
Another tip I want to give you for the self-check is that sometimes multiple sentences will work together for one purpose and fit under one label. What does this mean? For instance, one thing I require students to do is to explain their topic sentences. Often these explanations are more than one sentence long. Some students label that first sentence as explanation and then ask me as what this next sentence is doing. That next sentence may be still acting as explanation, so they can include it in their bracket of topic sentence explanation. Let me show you an example.
Okay, we're going to look at a part of the sample essay that is only one part from the checklist, but it has multiple sentences in the essay. Up here, we have the hook. Okay, you'll notice that the bracket starts here and ends here. It's multiple sentences long. However, it's only one part. I decided not to label everything. I just bracketed it. And if you don't like brackets, you could circle it, whatever you'd like. You can, do a bracket off to the side. But for this, I only did one label. And I only checked off one thing. Now, as I was writing this, I kind of had a brain fart. I was having trouble kind of connecting this piece of support back to the topic sentence and to the thesis. Since this is my first draft, what I did is I actually just made a note here so that I could come back to it later. I use parentheses to make notes. You can do whatever you want, bold or italics or underline or something. But I said need to connect back to topic, sentence, and thesis here. So I know that I need to take out my highlighter. And highlight that. That's something that I do not have yet. Okay. Yes, I'll need to go back and do that later. Okay. In addition, we have a transition there so we can kind of tell, hey, we're getting into another idea. The speaker pretends to block the banditi's advances and feels he is an aristocrat in his game with his daughters. Okay, again, what we're doing here is we're going from this piece of support and we're leading into the next piece of support. So leading into S2 and connecting S1 and S2, support 1 and support 2, that is. The speaker states that his daughters enter his castle wall, go into his turret, and he lives in a fortress where the bandits will stay locked in a round tower dungeon. Okay, so here's our support. I've also noticed a mistake as I'm reading through. Okay. In the actual poem, it says into my turret, but because of this sentence, I'm using third person, and I'm using third person. That's why those are in brackets. But turret, I didn't change. That was actually his original words. Okay, so this is support 2. We'll check that off. Let's see if it's explaining support 2, this sentence. The speaker blocks his daughter's advances to make their game more fun. He does not literally live in a fortress and has tried to lock bandits out. Okay, so that's an explanation. Let's see if the next sentence is 2. The reason I say that is because up here I had 2 sentences of explanation, so I might have done that again. We'll see. The speaker calls himself a bishop because he has been surrounded by his daughters, but also feels he lives a rich and privileged life as a result of his family, especially his daughters. Yes, I'd say that's still explanation. So we've got 2 sentences to explain support 2. Okay. And here I also made another note to myself, need to connect back to topic, sentence, and thesis here. And a second note, need to conclude the paragraph here. All right. And that's okay. Since this is my first draft, if I'm missing a few things, that's all right. What I don't want to do is be missing a lot of things. I want to try to have as much done for my first and second drafts as possible. Okay. Now, I didn't actually write out the rest of this essay just for time's sake. We don't have enough time to go over the full essay. This was my notes. Okay. And that's my first page. So as you see, this is completely marked up. Okay. You'll notice that not every sentence here is labeled, but that's because all of these sentences are working together as the hook. Okay, same for here. We've got a couple of sentences, but every single sentence that I've written is accounted for. I could label this if I want to, but it's not really in paragraph form, so I'm going to just say, no, I don't need to label this right now. Okay. Now, if I had come to class and hadn't finished the rest of my paragraphs like I did, I could highlight everything, but if I want to, I can also just circle the whole thing. Right, so I'm missing body paragraphs 2, 3, 4, 5, and my conclusion. Okay, this one I have in the first body paragraph, but I haven't had a chance to do the other one, so I'm gonna not circle it yet because it's not missing, but it's also, like, in the paragraph that I have, it's there, but it's also not in every paragraph because I'm not finished. Body paragraphs which discuss one literary technique used in a poem, connect literary techniques, fix the main idea, explain literary techniques. Okay, so, you know, that would be something maybe I would check after I'd finished it. I think in my first body paragraph, I could potentially explain metaphors a little bit more. So I'll make that note. Maybe I could use that explanation of metaphors as my connecting the support back to the topic sentence. That might be something I bring in. Okay. And then last here, I've got anything else I want to add or modify in your essay. So my biggest note would probably be finish the essay. Now, right now for this essay, I already have 2 pages. I have quite a long introduction paragraph, and I've got a pretty long first body paragraph. And for this essay, it's only required to be 4 to 6 pages. So I would be guessing that I may not need a 5th body paragraph. So I'm going to make that note here too. Most of my students do need a 5th body paragraph. You know, obviously I've been writing for a long time and I teach English, so my paragraphs are expected to be longer. But for people who are in English 101, it's perfectly normal to not write paragraphs this long. Okay, I got a little bit carried away. I really like this poem. So it would be normal for English 101 students to probably need a 5th body paragraph for a 4 to 6 page essay. Okay, it would be very normal to need that 5th body paragraph, but I personally don't need it. I do occasionally have some students who write long paragraphs like me, and so those students also don't need the 5th body paragraph. I put it in there as a requirement, but I always tell students you may not need it. It depends on what you're like as a writer. If you write short body paragraphs, you're going to need a 5th one, okay? So you don't have to force yourself to write really long ones if you prefer to write short body paragraphs, okay? So what I would do, going back on my essay and doing my second draft, I would look to see, oh, what am I missing? So that when I'm looking at my essay, maybe I don't need to read through every single sentence, but I need to go directly to the parts that I'm missing, okay? I wouldn't look back as much on my topic sentence or my first support or second support in body paragraph 1. I would look directly after my explanation of my support and try to figure out what do I need to connect, right? I would come back to this, and I would come back to this and this. All right, so that is an example of self-check. Keep in mind that this takes a lot longer for me to go through because I'm talking it through, but I mean, it may take you 20 to 30 minutes in your own time, especially the first time that you do the self-check, okay? And especially, if you've got all of your body paragraphs done, it might take you a long time. Once you get into practice, you'll see that it goes a lot faster. As I've told you, you kind of saw how fast I went through it. It was mostly explanation that took to the time. So don't be scared, if the first time or the second time you're doing self-check, if it takes a little bit of time. Don't be afraid of that. That's perfectly normal.
All right, that is the end of the video about self-checking your own essay. Try doing a self-check of your own essay and see what you need to add to your essay and what you need to change. You'll see how much better your writing gets with the help of that self-check. Is there anything I missed? Add it in the comments below or contact me. Until next time.